It's the late 1960s, and a band Creedence Clearwater Revival is capturing America's heart. Songs like Proud Mary, Bad Moon, Rising, and Fortunate Son become anthems for a generation dealing with war, social change, and hope for the future. At the center of the band is John Fogerty, lead singer, guitarist, and the creative force behind their sound. But beneath the surface, things aren't as harmonious as they seem. Now, after decades of silence, bassist Stu Cook is sharing his side of the story. At 79 years old, Stu Cook is finally shedding light on the struggles within CCR. His recent interview offers a look at a band torn apart by internal conflict, disagreements, and a leader whose drive for control changed everything. CCR released their first album in 1968 and quickly shot to fame. Their music was straightforward and catchy, a contrast to the complex sounds of other bands at the time. John Fogerty was the band's clear leader. He wrote the songs, decided how they should sound, and even had a hand in the band's image and album artwork. But according to Cook, this leadership often felt more like control. Reflecting on those early days, Stu Cook talks about John's demanding nature. John had a clear vision for what CCR should be, Cook says. But it wasn't just his vision, he wanted to make every decision himself. Every little detail had to go through him. As CCR's fame grew, so did the tension between John and the rest of the band. Cook, drummer Doug Clifford, and rhythm guitarist Tom Fogerty, John's older brother, found themselves with little say in the creative process. John's leadership style was creating a divide, but the band's success kept them together for the time being. Picture this, it's 1970, and CCR is at their peak, filling stadiums and churning out hit after hit. But behind closed doors, there's trouble. John Fogerty's perfectionism means hours in the studio, redoing takes until every note is just right. His demands are exhausting the band. What was once a group effort starts to feel like a one-man show. Stu Cook describes the shift in the band's dynamic. "We had been friends since high school, but John wanted to take over everything," Cook says. "He argued with all of us if we had ideas of our own. Eventually, it felt like our input didn't matter anymore." The creative tension reached a breaking point when Tom Fogerty left the band in 1971, frustrated by feeling sidelined. Tom's exit marked the beginning of the end for CCR. The remaining members struggled to fill the void left by Tom, and the disagreements between John, Stu, and Doug only got worse. By 1972, CCR's last album, Mardi Gras, exposed just how fractured they had become. John proposed a new approach: each member would contribute songs and sing lead. But instead of bringing the band together, it highlighted the cracks. Stu and Doug were used to backing John's lead, and stepping into the spotlight was a challenge. The album was poorly received, with critics calling it a failure. Stu Cook sees this album as part of John's strategy. "John wanted to prove that we couldn't make it without him," he admits. "He thought if the album didn't do well, it would show that he was the reason for our success. Maybe there's some truth in that, but it didn't have to be so painful." It felt like a power play. As the band fell apart, so did their friendships. John cut off contact with his former bandmates, and the tension turned into lawsuits over money and the rights to their music. What had once been a tight-knit group of friends was now defined by bitterness and courtroom battles. For years, Stu Cook kept his feelings private, focusing on life after CCR. He and Doug Clifford formed Creedence Clearwater Revisited in the 1990s, playing the songs that had defined their youth. But even as they toured, the past lingered. John Fogerty built a solo career, releasing albums that showed he could still write a great song. He even won a Grammy for Blue Moon Swamp. Yet the fallout with his old bandmates continued to haunt him, and he remained distant from Cook and Clifford. Now, with time having passed, Cook reflects on those turbulent years. "I don't deny that John is incredibly talented," he says. "But he was difficult, and his behavior destroyed what we had as a band. It's a shame, but it's the truth." Creedence Clearwater Revival's legacy is one of contrasts, legendary music, and bitter fallout. Their songs are still omnipresent, playing on classic rock stations, featured in movies, and cherished on streaming platforms by old and new fans alike. Tracks like Fortunate Son remain cultural touchstones, their sharp lyrics as relevant today as they were during the Vietnam War era. Yet behind these timeless hits is a narrative that's far more complex than the music suggests. It's a story shaped by intense artistic vision, simmering conflicts, and ultimately broken friendships. Even as CCR's catalog endures, the band's internal struggles left a mark that's hard to ignore. John Fogerty's creativity was undeniably at the heart of CCR's success. As the primary songwriter, lead vocalist, and guitarist, he crafted a distinctive sound that blended swampy southern rock with blues and country, even though the band hailed from California. His lyrical storytelling often captured the spirit of the time, speaking to the disillusionment of America's youth during the late 1960s and early 70s. This creative force propelled CCR to become one of the most successful American bands of their era, with a string of hits that climbed the charts. But according to Stu Cook, there was a cost to Fogerty's brilliance. His drive to steer every aspect of the band's direction left little room for collaboration, turning what began as a partnership into a struggle for control. Stu Cook's recent reflections pull back the curtain on the internal conflicts that simmered beneath CCR's meteoric rise. Cook describes a band that had once been built on friendship and shared goals, but by the early 1970s those bonds had deteriorated. He recalls how John Fogerty's desire for absolute authority became a constant source of tension. Cook and drummer Doug Clifford found themselves sidelined creatively as John made all major decisions down to the minutest details like album covers. What Cook viewed as an overbearing leadership style led to resentment, as the rest of the band felt increasingly like backup musicians rather than equal contributors. This tension became even more palpable during the recording of Mardi Gras, the band's final album, when John's decision to split songwriting duties revealed the deeper rift between them. Mardi Gras proved to be the breaking point, exposing just how fractured CCR had become. John's insistence that Cook and Clifford contribute their own songs a challenge after years of working under his creative shadow seemed to backfire. Critics panned the album, calling it uneven and lacking the focus that had defined CCR's previous work. Stu Cook has since suggested that this approach was Fogerty's way of proving a point that without his leadership, the band could not maintain the high standards that had propelled them to stardom. Cook and Clifford's inexperience in taking the lead musically showed, and the album's poor reception became a painful validation of John's importance to the band's formula. But rather than bringing them closer, it solidified the divide, leading to CCR's breakup and the unraveling of their friendships. The band's dissolution wasn't just a matter of creative differences, it devolved into a series of legal battles and personal animosity. Lawsuits over royalties and the rights to CCR's music kept the former bandmates locked in conflict for years. John Fogerty famously refused to play with his former bandmates, even at events like their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 1993, citing the deep scars left by their falling out. Cook and Clifford, meanwhile, sought to keep the CCR spirit alive through their spin-off project, Creedence Clearwater Revisited, which allowed them to tour and perform the songs they helped bring to life. Yet even this venture stirred up fresh disputes, as John sought to distance himself from any association with his former bandmates. Was John Fogerty a genius or a saboteur? The question of whether John Fogerty was a visionary whose control was necessary or a leader whose methods destroyed a promising partnership has lingered for decades. His unwavering dedication to quality certainly played a role in shaping CCR's polished yet raw sound, one that continues to resonate with audiences today. But his unwillingness to share the creative process, even with longtime friends, turned what could have been a balanced collaboration into a struggle for power. Stu Cook's story offers a counter-narrative to the perception of John as solely a tortured genius, highlighting the toll of his leadership style on those around him. Yet he acknowledges that John's talent and determination were a significant part of what made CCR special. Cook's reflections emphasize that the band's story is not just about music, it's about the dynamics of friendship, ambition, and what happens when creative visions collide. The truth, as with many legendary bands, likely lies somewhere between admiration for John's artistry and the bitterness over the way he wielded his influence. CCR's story remains a reminder of the fine line between genius and discord, illustrating how creative tensions can either propel a band to new heights or unravel it completely. For fans, the legacy of Creedence Clearwater Revival is a mix of nostalgia for their timeless songs and a sense of what might have been, had the personal clashes not taken over. Yet, as complicated as their legacy is, the music endures, continuing to evoke the spirit of an era and the raw, uncompromising edge of a band that was both united and divided by its leader.